long time, enemies have been a necessity in many video games. Even when the original Super Mario Bros. Took gaming by storm, bad guys were already a well-established concept. However, with Super Mario Bros. Being crafted by the genius Shigeru Miyamoto, the game's foes are some of the most iconic of all time. It's not necessarily the complexity of the enemies that make them memorable, but rather how well they were integrated into the games, even with technical limitations. 3 decades later, as the franchise grew, they've added a few more foes, so I think it's a good time to count down my 10 favorites. Enemies that qualify in this category are ones I find the most memorable in terms of their design, method of attack, or in other attributes. Also, I will only be considering regular enemy species, so no bosses. Now with all that out of the way, let's just get rolling already. With a wide selection of choices for this list, both recognizable and somewhat obscure, we might as well begin on the same page. Coincidentally enough, I'm starting off with arguably the most iconic enemy in this series full of iconic enemies. In the first level of the original Super Mario Bros., you are immediately greeted with Goombas as a signature enemy type, giving you an easy-to-grasp concept on how the game plays out. Jump on enemies, they turn into pancakes. Soon enough in the same level, you come across a different foe, and with the knowledge you acquired when facing the Goombas, you apply it here. To your surprise though, you just send it gliding across the ground at 60 miles per hour. I'm sure there's inspiration for that somewhere. Although the Koopa Troopas technically first appeared in Mario Bros. Under a different name, it was their second showing that gave them their definitive concept. It's something we usually don't think twice about since it's so ingrained in the franchise at this point, but it had to take a top-notch failing physics student to come up with this. When you set a Koopa shell into motion, no friction can save you, as this beast will plow through any living thing in its path. If you get this thing ricocheting to where there are no pits and you have no power-ups, the only way to stop the shell is by jumping on it, which can put you in quite a risky situation. Enemies that appeared later on eventually picked up on the sliding shell behavior, but the one to introduce this concept to the world takes the cake here. Koopa Troopas have even been shown to utilize their own shell as a means of attack and as a form of protection. I would call them complete wusses, but it's kind of understandable. For a franchise that puts an emphasis on reoccurring classic enemies, it's easy for people to forget about the new recruits. The modern enemies have a smaller role and usually appear in only a few games, so they mostly exist to shake up the gameplay and help each new installment stand out. Case in point, the Octoombas. Starting off, the most glaring thing about these foes is their design, which looks otherworldly and feels right at home in the Galaxy games. This thing is the result of a Goomba and an Octorok having a baby on the moon, which could sound like a messy idea for a common enemy type, but the aspects of its design are so well blended together that it still looks simple as a whole. What's also quite unique compared to the other foes is that this enemy's form of attack changed between the games it appears in. In Super Mario Galaxy, Octoombas can only headbutt you when close in range, something that the Star Spin just laughs at. When they came around for the sequel, however, in all seriousness, giving Octoombas rock projectiles was a much needed upgrade that forced the player to approach these guys much more carefully. Apparently Nintendo didn't think that was enough, so they were further changed in Super Mario 3D World. Now they shoot 3 cannonballs at a time, and are even defensively stronger as they can only be killed with a ground pound. These changes aren't anything too drastic, but the tweaks are made in a way that keeps the core projectile concept, and complements each game's mechanics. With the benefit of complementing the setting for an entire game, Octoombas are more significant than most of the other newer enemies, with many being created only to serve as basic obstacles to be used in a few levels. They fulfill their purpose just fine, yet tend to blend in the huge roster and be forgotten by most players. Looking through these guys is like searching the bargain bin, but finding something special is well worth it. Meet the Mattermouth. Despite having a minor presence, only appearing in 2 levels and in a Mario Party minigame, a cool concept is something I can get behind. Mattermouths will chomp up the ground, leaving an opening in its path where Mario can fall through. Sounds fairly simple, but looking at the situation leaves you questioning this thing's ability to endlessly devour material, and the fact that they eat in places just fill up. I will say though that what essentially amounts to moving pits proposes a very unique hazard from a gameplay standpoint. Just think of a time you would ride a platform cutting through the abyss, just the opposite. I think that's a good way to sum it up. For such a minor enemy, the developers do a good job of using it to keep you on your toes, with the main challenge being to jump over the pits. The moving floors thrown into the equation the second time you encounter them adds a nice difficulty curve. These things didn't particularly strike me as memorable when I first saw them, but looking into it a bit more, I think they have a lot more going for them than most would initially think. One of the biggest traditional staples of the Mario series is the handling of power-ups, where further abilities are given to the player as a reward for making it to the next mystery block while remaining big. Especially with the Fire Flower, enemy encounters are made much easier, yet you still have to be good not to lose it. This core idea is never turned on its head, but the Hammer Brothers truly stress the difference between boys and men. Without a third dimension for evasion, Hammer Bros have made a name for themselves as the most infamous Mario enemy. Giving these guys projectiles was already a step up, but the way the developers went about the execution in full puts them in a league of their own. In the same game that followed logic as a mere myth, the path of the thrown hammers resembles actual physics, being affected by gravity and therefore flying in an arc. Combine this with the Hammer Bros' behavior of spamming said projectiles unpredictably, and getting juicy headshots on them is easier said than done. Having extra firepower can make things much simpler, but the moments without it will leave you begging for mercy. At this point, good maneuvering will definitely help you succeed, but with a luck card to the Hammer Bros' sporadic movements, any course of action can be a major risk. Experiences with these things at the wrong moments can be complete hell, but when used sparingly, I find there to be a thrill to the challenge of taking them out. If anything, they're the type of enemy that I love to hate. And now, thanks to Super Mario Maker, these fiends are available to every 8-year-old out there. It truly is a time to be alive. As we've seen time and time again, Mario can just seamlessly excel in many different game genres. If I had to guess why it works, I'd say it has something to do with how well they combine the classic Mario elements with different styles of gameplay. It's here that we arrive at the RPGs. Aside from introducing loads of new monsters, many of the main series enemies also joined the fun. Taking the enemy's attacks from the main games and pasting them in this unique battle system were the lengths that were usually gone to. Of course, this works perfectly fine, but going above and beyond is a beautiful thing. If Ninja isn't ringing any bells, I don't really blame you. From their debut back in Super Mario Bros. 2, they were just an easy obstacle that did nothing remarkable, and it stayed that way for years. They rarely ever had a prominent role in any games after Mario 2, and were mainly restricted to the occasional cameo. But hey, Nintendo certainly isn't one to forget about things, so it only made sense that these guys were given a proper home. Starting with Paper Mario Sticker Star, ninjas have become somewhat of a mainstay in the newer Mario RPGs. Now they act a lot more like actual ninjas, to where they can disappear and set up a little decoy if struck with the wrong attack, and even have the ability to fold themselves into origami ninja stars. Although I'll give credit to Sticker Star for reviving these enemies, it was truly their appearance in Mario & Luigi Paper Jam that made me appreciate them. A good battle system is there for starters, but a lot of the ideas brought forth by Sticker Star were pushed further. Tweak up their decoy system to where you have to put variety in your own attacks, allow them to create clones, and tuck them in camouflage blankets, and you easily have the most creative enemy in Paper Jam. I slightly hinted at this in my last entry, but in typical RPG fashion, the Mario games of said genre deliver on a plethora of new enemy species. They're without a doubt in the shadow of the main series icons, but are pretty interesting in their own right. With there being so many, and with each having a smaller impact individually, it would seem impossible to choose just one. But there's a single hidden gem that I personally lean towards. No need to feel bad about missing this one either, as a strange enemy that made an appearance in only 2 games of a genre less famous than the platformers. B-Hoss isn't winning any popularity contests, but good God, is this thing such a fascinating abomination. Right off the bat you'll notice its design, which is just awesome. It may seem like a petty thing to praise, but when the 7-year-old inside of me sees a walking beehive demon with spikes and glowing red eyes, I just have to melt on the inside. Some may say it suffered Pokemon syndrome of giving inanimate objects eyes, but I see no problem when they run wild and do so much with it. As for battle properties, B-Hoss fights in a very different way as it sits back and summons bees to do the heavy lifting. They started out humble in Bowser's Inside Story by sending one bee to charge at a time, but began attacking with full swarms upon returning in Dream Team. The bees themselves have unique behaviors such as waiting for Bowser to come out of his shell, and God forbid you accidentally jump on one in Dream Team, or the remaining bees in the swarm will mass sting you in an act of revenge. I may be gushing here, but with the immense creativity expressed in this creature's design and attack pattern, this is my pick for the best Mario RPG enemy any day. Since when were bugs cute? If prehistoric evidence tells us anything, the concept of giant insects is downright horrifying. Not sure if it was intentional, but introducing an insect enemy similar in size to its prehistoric ancestors in a game that takes place in Dinosaur Land is pretty clever. Though with the benefit of this being Nintendo, making Wiggler realistic in any way was out of the question. You can imagine the idea of this nightmarish, creepy crawly all you want, but give him polka dots, cute sneakers, and plant a daisy on his head, and the tone takes a sudden shift. Aww, I just want to hug him. If you ask me, hands down, cutest Mario enemy. Well, at least when it's happy. This brings me to Wiggler's main gimmick, which is how quickly they can lose their temper. For caterpillars, these guys are quite beefy, being able to just ignore the attacks of most power-ups. Yet those who dare jump on a Wiggler's back will send it into an angry frenzy. When a Wiggler reaches a state, its blood will boil to the point where its body turns bright red, and it will start charging much quicker. This isn't the most challenging gimmick in the series, but it's certainly inventive. Another quality I enjoy about Wiggler is how much character it has. No, I'm not referring to the multiple character roles Wiggler has had over the years, but just how expressive it is as an enemy. Maybe it has something to do with the upgrade to 16-bit graphics and a wacky art style that helped all of the enemies pop more, but I get the feeling that Wiggler is just a big goofy caterpillar. Adoring your enemy is probably wrong, but I already lost that battle. You get a cookie if you saw this one coming. For a Mario enemy that I chose to be the name and face of my channel, it only makes sense for it to appear on a list like this. I will admit though that this choice for my mascot is mainly due to ShyGuy's design, because I am the shallowest human being in the world. The name is what you get, shy-hooded creatures with an unrevealing composition that provokes a sense of intrigue. Luigi has definitely seen things, but man, the things I would give just to get a peek at what's under that tempting mask. It's also quite fitting that these guys are basically the outcasts of the franchise, rarely making their way into the main games. That being said, Shy Guys usually appear in spin-offs, and while it isn't rare for them to be Goomba of the Week, they begin to shine in the assortment of forms they can take. When it comes to hindering your progress, these buggers will use a variety of techniques that don't fail in the creativity department. Being effective by wielding spears and bombs is one thing, but taking the extreme measure of setting themselves on fire is when you know they're looking for results. And for whosever idea it was to assault with stilts, has to be Minion of the Month. No matter the method though, I always crack a smile at their effort. It may be weird not seeing my mascot top the list, but all I can say is that the next two spots we have left are more anchored to a specific gimmick and are just better enemies in my opinion. Still, Shy Guys are a mysterious and charming species whose presence I will always enjoy. I think it comes as no surprise that Super Mario Bros. 3 is a very important game. Mario 2 has a bit of a messy identity between its Japanese and American releases, and while it still impacted the series in many ways, the third installment felt like the first true expansion of the main series. It doesn't take a genius to know where this is going. The collection of baddies brought about by this game certainly isn't lacking, and for this spot, I chose the booze. Just like with every enemy cliché, it was only a matter of time before angry spirits started infesting our Mario games. Boarding the train this early helped the Boo become one of the most developed species in the entire franchise. Mario 3 was their origin, and while it gave them the only strike when your back is turned behavior that they're known for, the real turning point was to happen shortly. Fast forward a year to this hot new game Super Mario World, and now we're able to confront the Boos in their home turf. These ghost houses have become a huge staple as the series went on, and gave the Boos the time to take center stage. When it came to keeping things fresh for the good part of 2 decades, these levels connected the Boos to countless bizarre subspecies, and capitalized on their elusive trickery. Whether you like the confusing nature of the ghost houses or not, you can't deny the amount of variety they offer revolving around one core enemy type is quite impressive. Of course they aren't strictly limited to these specific stages, but they are what mostly give the Boos extra depth. With just the sheer amount of times these deceptive foes have appeared since their debut, they truly feel like an essential part of the Mario universe. It's almost common knowledge at this point that Mario and nostalgia practically go hand in hand. While the entire franchise is classified like this for a general audience, nostalgia can also be applied for the small things that enhance our individual experiences. Maybe it's a special power-up or level you hold closely, and while I have a few of those myself, you know what you came for. It wasn't a tough decision for me. Dry Bones is just that cool. Starting from my first encounter with these guys in Super Mario World, something about them just always appealed to me. In Super Mario World, and across many other games for that matter, I strongly remember the intimidation upon entering fortress levels, and them being crawling with dry bones really adds to the gloomy atmosphere. But what truly makes Dry Bones itself is its gimmick. Jumping on one of these things won't kill it, or send it to the afterlife, as it can just resurrect within seconds. The main challenge is that unless you have a specific power-up to annihilate them, these guys will endlessly get up from your pathetic attacks and get straight back to work. They've also been given throwing bones and wings in certain installments, just to add to the fun. Sure, I may be a bit biased, but I still stand by my choice. It isn't the most innovative idea or anything, but I appreciate it for being a simple yet unique monster. As a kid, I knew this edgy skeleton turtle was damn awesome, and even looking at its design and concept without the rose-colored glasses, I still find it to be a very solid enemy.